Hi, it's Jane, and apparently the video that I thought I had filmed showing you how to make the tote, I got confused with the drawstring bag. So we're going to redo the tote, showing you how to make a tote bag. You are going to need 2 pieces of your outer fabric. Generally I do a 16 by 16 for that. And 2 pieces for your inner fabric. Same measurements, 16 by 16. Now you're going to need 2 pieces of fusible, I use woven interfacing, which would be SF101, woven fuse. Trying to think of the other name of one of the other ones. But you're going to need 2 pieces for this that you're going to use whatever your instructions are, and you're going to fuse it to your outer fabrics. When you use a woven fuse interfacing, it bonds to the material and makes the material a lot stronger, almost like a canvas. Now, if you want to make a pocket, then you would need extra fabric. I am going to make a pocket for these. And this one is just the leftover piece that is about 9 inches by 16. Generally what I'm going to do is I am going to make the pocket by using half of it. And so I would need interfacing that's probably 9 by, I don't know, anywhere from 8 to be 8 this way and maybe 10 this way. If this is 10 inches, which I think it is. Yes, it is. It's 10 inches across. This is just the leftover from cutting the outer piece. So, yeah, that's what I would do for the pocket. And I'll show you how I do the pocket as well. So you're going to get a little bonus of adding it's just a slip pocket. Sometimes I take these leftover pieces and I make pouch bags out of them, but I'm not today. So, and this is a bit of a directional fabric, so you need to keep that in mind when you start your sewing. You're also going to need 2 straps, anywhere from 24 inches to 27 inches, depending on how big a shoulder drop you want. And I use cotton webbing, 1 inch for that. You get a big roll of it. I think it's 20 yards or 10 yards for like $17, something like that, on Amazon. I haven't priced it at, I don't know if it's pronounced Wawak or Waywak. It's W-A-W-A-K. I haven't priced it there, but you may find it at a better price there. And of course, you're going to find a whole lot of colors everywhere. I use black, white, and tan, or what's called off-white many times. So these are going to get black because that's what I have right now. All right, guys, I'll see you over at the sewing machine. I am going to iron my fusing on. I don't think you need to watch me do that. It's a pretty simple process, but yeah, I'll see you over at the sewing table and we'll get started. Okay, first I'm going to start out with the pockets. Do use my eyewear. These are just reading glasses. It protects the eyes. And generally when I am doing a pocket like this, it's just a fold over. Try to make sure that I put my interfacing on the side that once it's turned out, would be right side up like this. And basically, what we're going to do is I'm just going to sew around the edges up to this corner, leave an opening, and then back around this way. And I have 2 pockets, so I'm going to do both of them at the same time. And you can use a 1/2 inch, you could use a 1/4 inch, you can use whatever you want for that. I am using roughly 3/8 of an inch. You could draw it on your fabric if you needed to. I don't normally draw it. And as you can see, it's not perfectly cut, but I don't worry about it. Set that pocket aside and do the other pocket same way. I do use a ladder or a leader. Some of them call them leaders. And this one's going to be a little bit shorter. Just because of where the interfacing lays. Now, I would clip the corners. Don't cut through your stitching. Then turn it right side out and press it. And we'll do that in just a moment. I'll be back. I'm going to go do that. And then I'll be back to show you the rest of that with the pocket. Well, I sewed it and didn't film. Basically, you're going to take your pocket, determine if you want to put your label on it. I did choose to put a label on it. I find the center and place my tag on there, and then I sew it in place. I don't always do that. Normally, I do it on the lining, but it works either way. And now we're going to work on the lining piece. If your lining has a clear direction, sorry about hitting that. If your lining has a clear direction, you need to make sure that your next step is going to be that your, if it has a direction, you need to make sure the direction that needs to be up will be up at the very top. Now I do take and just fold it in half, and then I finger crease it. And normally that's where I would put my label, but I'm finger creasing it for a different reason today. Now I will go ahead, fold it in half, and mark my corners. And I generally do 2.5 inches, so I just use my 2.5 inch ruler. Draw it. Use a pencil or pen. I don't worry about it erasing because it's all going to get cleaned up in the wash and taken out that way. Then I go ahead and I cut this out. I do set these aside because I do often either use them as a ladder or I will use them to make a quilt. Sorry, brain fart. All right, now I am going to take my ruler and I'm just going to place a line on that line where I'd marked it down. Place the ruler on the 2.5 inch mark. Across the top. I'd already folded and put a center mark on this one. So I'm going to line that up with that right there. And then I'm just going to pin this in place. Just need to make sure I'm just using the one piece fabric. I don't need both of them. Pin it to the one piece fabric. I still will double check to make sure I didn't move it any while I was picking it up, because I've been known to do that. Now I will set the rest of this aside. And the opening is down here at the bottom. We've pressed it closed. So now I'm just going to sew around the outer edge to get that pocket sewn on there. And you can use anywhere from 1/4 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch. I normally choose 1/8 of an inch. And you do want to do some back tacking on each of those corners, because there is going to be a little bit of wear and tear. Now from here, I know a lot of people need to mark lines, so if you need to mark a line for your sewing line, then by all means do that. I don't always do that. Now this one I will use a pen that erases, or I will use a washable marker. And I'm just going to put that one line in there to divide that pocket. And I do use the flywheel so that I can make sure that I get that needle right in the spot it needs to be. And there you have it. Now when I take this to the iron, because it'll erase with heat, then that line will be gone. Then I'm going to take the top two for the lining. Top edges, make sure you don't have something like that. You want your bottoms to line up. So generally I would just take and clip these. I don't always clip them because I'm used to doing this so often. And generally I take a little bit of a 3/8 inch at the beginning. Want to line up your edges. And then I go down to 1/4 of an inch. And you're just going to sew down to that bottom edge. You can use 1/2 inch seam allowance. I just use 1/4 of an inch there. Now at the bottom, I am going to sew my seam at about 1/2 inch. And that is so that it will fit properly in the bag and won't bunch up much. You're going to sew part of the way across the bottom. You want to leave enough space so that you can get your hand in there to turn it when you birth the bag. And I generally say about 4 to 5 inches. You could use pens to mark that if you need to. I do stop and start with my machine a lot. I know a lot of people don't do that. They just would just go ahead and pivot and turn. And you can do that because it'll help line up those seams. I just don't do that anymore. Then we will box the bottom, which basically will just line these two seams up and sew across. Now I do use 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 an inch on these boxing areas. Just find that works a little bit better. And when I do the outer bag, I will show you what I mean about a lot of people don't stop and start at the ends of those. Now on the aligning, I don't do a second row. I don't find it necessary, so now I'll set this aside and we'll get the outer bag. And this is where you need to make sure that your pieces are in the right direction if they are directional. So I would need to place this one this way. The second piece, I need to make sure it's faced the same way, but I will face them right sides together. And I will match up the edges so I can mark my box corner part. And I will place clips along the sides there so that I have them correctly placed. I don't always bring clips all the way down to the bottom, and that's because I'm going to fold this in half so that I can cut out the section for my box bottoms. Again, you can use a marking pen, you can use a pencil. I generally use a pencil. And it's 2.5 inches. Then you trim it. Now I have saved these corner pieces to put into quilts too. Not always, it just depends. Sometimes I just use them as ladders. Since it has the interfacing on it, I don't normally, choose to use it in that way. And then I will sew my seams up on the sides. I do use 1/4 of an inch. And if you're going to use this method, you do not need to back tack. You're basically going to bring the bottom up right here to this edge and just sew right across. You'll do the same thing with the next side. Just bring it up. You just need, well, that'll still work out. You just need to make sure that you're getting those sides placed correctly. Now you can, here's the method that a lot of people like to use. By sewing it that way, when you bring these to box them, they automatically meet up. And I've used that trick quite often, not always. And see where I didn't get my interface completely ironed in. Now I'm going to sew across the bottom. I'm going to use 1/4 inch for this seam. I am going to back tack here. And you will see me go back and forth a couple of times because I want to make that seam nice and strong. And you can clip your extra strings off here if you need to. If you don't, if you're not comfortable, and see, I missed a spot here. If you're not comfortable, going backwards, you can actually just turn it over and sew it again along that edge. Or just sew over your line again. That is entirely up to you. These are what are called side clips. I don't know if you can see that. They have a little bit of, they're not a complete scissor, it's just a little rounded edge. And they're okay. I use them frequently for this kind of stuff. And then you'll box the other side again as well. And if you want to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance, do it. I find that 1/4 inch is sufficient. Again, you want to trim your threads. I do know a lot of people that would clip those corners. I don't normally clip the corners. You want to turn this bag right side out. And then what I do is I fold it in half to where it's kind of like seam meeting seam here. And I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to mark 3 inches from the seam this way and this way. And then do it on the other side as well. You could mark the center of the bag and go from the center, your choice. This is just what I choose to do. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll get the handles in place. Hi. All right, now I've got my bag marked, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my strap and I am going to place it where my mark is right here. I'm going to place my strap right there with the mark off to this side. I am going to pin that in place. You want to get it straight. Now I am going to place 2 pins on one on either side of the strap, like so. Okay, and the reason that I do that is because it will shift a little bit, you know, as you're moving, that kind of thing. Then you're going to make sure that your strap is not twisted. Bring it up to the other mark here. And we're going to place that right there. And we'll pin it. If you want to use clips, use clips. I just choose to use the pins. And then I do the same thing on the opposite side of the bag. Again, I'm going to place my strap right there. Pin it on both sides of the strap. And then I will do it again, make sure that it's not twisted. Bring it off to the other side. You can barely see this mark because it's in the dark blue. Place that right next to there. I can see it, but you're not going to see it. Place the strap and pin it as well. And then we are going to sew those straps in place. I do use about 1/4 inch across the top, and I do go back and forth a couple of times. And you're just going to do that on all 4 spots where your strap is at the top of your bag. And if you can see I went into fabric there, that is fine. It will all work out. Now I remove all the pins. I do go along and cut where some of these long strings are. I don't really worry about the ones on the inside of the bag, because those generally will get, as I was saying, generally those will be on the inside of the bag. Now you're going to take and you're going to place your outer bag into your lining. so that right sides are right sides against each other. Then you're going to take where your seam is. You're going to match up the seams like this. Generally what I do is I pin it there. And then I will line up the other seam on the other side. Such as there, and I will pin it. Then I will go along and clip it, matching the edges together along the top. And generally the way that I do that is I take and I straighten up that handle there and take it along the edge there. Place a clip between here and the seam and then right there where that one is. Then I will go to the other side. Make sure the handle is fairly straight. And generally I will clip the handle where it sits first and then the inside here. And then from there you just want to make sure that you're getting this edges nice and even. Just clip them in place. If you don't have clips, you could pin. And then you're going to repeat that on the other side. And then we're going to sew it. Alright, I'm ready to start sewing. And I usually start right at the seam. And I do use my 3/8 mark here on my sewing machine, the foot plate. And generally just sew all the way around. When I get to where the handles are, and you'll know it, I do go back and forth. Give it a little extra stability. And you're just sewing this around to join it. We're back at the next handle. It's better if you remove your pins and not sew over them. You can break a needle, and you don't want to do that because it'll fly up, may hit you in the eye, may go into your eye, and that's no fun. So that's where I wear either some kind of reading glasses or regular glasses so that my eyes are protected. That is the one thing I wish most people when they sew would do, is protect their eyes. And now you're finished with that. Trim your threads if you want to. I do a little bit of a shaving, but most of those threads are going to be on the inside. Now here's the fun part. You get to birth your bag. And you remember we had that opening at the bottom for the bag to come out. You're basically just going to reach in and you're going to start to manhandle your bag to where you're pulling that outer bag out. And you're basically turning your lining piece inside out. Now I generally do take a point turner and make sure that my corners are out fairly decently. And I will do that on the lining, but I will also insert this down into the bag and make sure that the corners of the bag itself are pushed out. And I think you can see I'm kind of running that point turner across the bottom seam as well, because it wants to curl in sometimes. And that kind of gives it a little bit of a, I think, a mini press, so that that seam will stay in place a little bit better. Now, you can turn right ahead and close up your opening, which you would do kind of in this manner that I do. Stick my fingers in the corner there, and generally it'll fold in on itself, and generally I just take my fingers and kind of run across it to kind of give it a little press. You could take and press it if you want to. Finger pressing normally works just fine, but make sure that at your seams you don't have pins still in there on both sides, because if you sew your opening closed, you're going to have to open it up with that seam ripper. You're going to have to frog it, rip it, and nobody likes that. Now, you can hand sew this if you want. I generally just use a sewing machine and do the 1/8 of the stitch. I mean, just 1/8 inch seam right along the bottom where the opening is. And then I will trim up those threads. And all right, and now we simply push the inside of the bag into the bag itself. Push your lining into it. Sometimes it seems like it's a little bit of a hassle, but you'll get it. Now, as you can see, there are some strings here, and a lot of that is some of the material that frays. So I generally just clip it close to the seam there. And it kind of disappears all on its own. Sometimes they pull out, sometimes they don't. Well, didn't get that clip. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with this. We are going to, and you may need to kind of roll your seam. You're basically going to make sure that your center seam is nice and flat. And you just kind of want to roll that seam back and forth, because now we're going to top stitch. Now you could use pins in that if you wanted to. I don't always. And I don't always press. There's some times that you need to press because it's just being obstinate and difficult to get that rolled. But generally it's fairly easy. Not too much of an issue. You just want to make sure that your lining is not rolled up over like that. You just want to get them even as possible. You could have done some understitching and I don't normally do understitching. Understitching kind of helps those seams lay a little flatter when you need them to be. I find that it doesn't always need to be done. Depends on the project. But basically that's what you're going to do. You're going to roll this back and forth in between your fingertips to where it lays fairly evenly. And you can see I'm just finger pressing, basically. And generally when I top stitch, I change my stitch length on my machine. I should have told you what my stitch length was very beginning. The stitch length that I normally sew the bags with is a 2.5, which is what is normal for a lot of sewing projects. But when you top stitch, change your stitch length to either a 3 or a 3.5. I have sometimes used 2.75, 2.9, depending on the fabric that I'm working with. When I use canvas, I usually use a 2.75. So I am going to change my stitch length to a 3.0. And then we're just going to do the top stitching. And when I do my top stitching, generally, I use 1/8 of an inch. Now my sewing machine, my foot, this is a 1/4 inch foot. If I am sewing right here where this edge of this foot is, then that is 1/4 inch. You see it's got a little bit of a cutout here. That makes it 1/8 of an inch if I am running that edge right along that top. And that's generally what I do. That's what you're going to do next. Try to start at the seam. You see I used my hand wheel to bring that needle down. And you know, there's no racing. You don't have to race to get it finished. But generally you just want to run that edge right along there. 4 1/8 of an inch to do your top stitching. And a lot of folks, when they use the top stitching, the reason they use 3.0 is because it gives it a more professional look. Now I use just plain basic isocord polyester thread in my machine. And I use that for sewing just about every project I'm sewing, whether I'm, you know, quilting or piecing or anything like that. The only thing I don't use that is when I'm making bulk cozies or plate cozies, because that needs to be all cotton. In case some of you put it in your microwave, because if you put polyester into your microwave, it will catch on fire because it is a oil-based product. So I generally recommend that folks don't put their bowl cozies, plate cozies in the microwave. Usually I kind of take my time with this one. Get back to the beginning. I do a back tap. You just want to clip your threads and you're finished. I do one more step because I do take it to the iron and I press it. And generally I press it so that my corners are down into the corners. Generally it's just a matter of feeling, getting them down in there. You can take both hands and double check. And then when I iron it to where it's basically a flat piece like this. Sometimes you have to roll the seams like we did before. There are tools that you can use like a sleeve arm that'll help you with that if you choose to use it. I don't always use it, don't always find it necessary. So that is it. Your bag is finished. You've got a nice slip pocket on the inside there, and you're ready to use it. All right, everybody, have a great day. See you again next time.